عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى وسلم على سيدنا محمد سيدنا وسندنا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا ومولانا صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه وذرياته وأهل بيته ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد. So we continue what the Quran refers to as Ahsan al-Qasas, the most beautiful of stories, which we started yesterday, and that was the story of Sayyiduna Yusuf alayhissalam. And Ahsan al-Qasas is interesting because it means the best of stories. It means the most beautiful stories. And like we mentioned yesterday, it was a story, the central theme of which is beauty. And how do people deal with beholding beauty, which is a very powerful spiritual experience inside. What are positive and helpful and useful and profound ways of interpreting beauty, and what are destructive ways of dealing with it, of having seen it, having made mushahada and bearing witness to it. So we left off yesterday with the story that the Aziz of Misr, Qatfir, the minister of state in whose house Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam had grown up and under whose generosity he was raised. And he is in this really awkward position that his wife accuses Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam of doing evil by her. So what do you say about someone who wishes for your family evil? Meaning what? That she accused him of some sort of impropriety or abuse. And Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam obviously will then deny that he did anything of the sort, and he will then make the counterclaim, which is that in fact she was the one who called me, and she was the one who tried to do something bad by me. So the Aziz is at this point confused. He doesn't know what to think. It's just a hearsay. It's he said, she said. So he does something very wise, which is he goes and asks a trusted person in the household. It's important not to make rash decisions hastily, rather to consult with people and hear them out, which is one of the beautiful qualities of this ummah, especially the best of it, that Allah Ta'ala described the companions radiallahu anhum as those people who are such that وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُم وَأَمْرُهُم شُورَى بَيْنَهُم, that their affair amongst them is through shura, it's through mashra, it's through mutual consultation, hearing each other out and giving due consideration to what each other has to say, rather than dismissing one another and being obstinate in that dismissal. So what happens is that he asks somebody, another person who is from the household staff, whose opinion he takes seriously and takes values. And that person tells him, look at his shirt, which is ripped. If it's ripped from the front, then your wife is telling the truth and he's lying. And if it's ripped from the back, then your wife is lying and he's telling the truth. And so they saw the shirt, and the shirt was ripped from the back. It was not ripped from the front. And Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam was vindicated. And this is very important, especially when it comes to prophets. And we'll see even in this very story itself, the importance of vindication, the importance of showing people that what you were doing is not wrong, that it was right. It's especially important for a prophet. Why? Because a prophet speaks on behalf of Allah Ta'ala, speaks on behalf of the Lord. And so if people have a doubt about the veracity of what he's saying, then it kind of destroys that whole purpose. And so you'll see this, that even we mentioned there are a number of stories basically about the prophets wherever they're wrongfully accused of something. There's a special focus on having some sort of evidence of their vindication. So what ends up happening is that Sayyidina Yusuf's pardon is sought, and he's told to turn away from this. And this is but just one chapter in this saga. So what ends up happening is later on in like Egyptian high society, the women start to gossip amongst each other, and they say with regards to the wife of the Aziz, whose name is reported in the Israeliyat as Zulaykha, whose name is reported as Zulaykha. And so Zulaykha, the ladies in high society in Egypt start to gossip about her, and they speak ill of her, that look what happened to this poor girl, she's like fallen in love with her slave boy, with her servant boy, and his love has driven her mad. And she just kind of became the object of their mockery because of that. And so in order to prove them wrong or to shut them up, she does something, after some time, which is she invites them all over for a meal. And she at every place setting at the table, she places a knife, and then she distributes some fruit or something that needs to be cut with a knife. And just as the ladies are about to cut their food with the knife, she asks Sayyiduna Yusuf to come out and introduce himself to the company, and all the women end up cutting their hands because of how beautiful he is. And it's a hadith that half of the physical beauty of Banu Adam was given to this Yusuf alayhi salam. So they all end up cutting themselves, and they all end up injuring themselves. And she says to the ladies, she says, "This is the one. This is the one you got. You all of you were mocking me and making fun of me, and speaking ill of me. This is the one that you were mocking me because of his, because of my having fallen in love with him." And when she sees how much effect there is, and how basically the other ladies are now, they understand, like, where she was coming from, she herself becomes emboldened, and she says that, now I'm going to come to him again, and if he tries to protect himself from me, I'm not going to take no for an answer. And so at this point, Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, he has very few options as a slave in the house, and as somebody who wants to not do bad by his master who treated him well. The only way he can escape this, he literally describes it as asbu ilayhinna wa kum min al-jahilin, that, like, ya Allah, it's more beloved to me that instead of me turning toward them. And because, if a person has a choice between doing what's right and doing something that's really hard or bad, people will usually choose what's right, because nobody wants to do something hard or something bad. But this is essentially, a choice between indulging his carnal desires or doing what's right. And this is the prophetic character that he showed, which was that the only way out of this bad situation, that he said that I myself, as a human being, would feel some attraction to that, if I allow myself to go down that path. Instead of doing that, what does he do? He just says, I'm going to figure out a way to get thrown in jail, and that way I'll be protected from these ladies. Like, they can't come after me. They're not going to be able to get to me. And so he does it. He chooses prison over doing a sin against the Lord, which is a wonderful and a fine sunnah. And we are people who are, as Muslims, we're law-abiding citizens, and we are people who respect the law and respect community and respect order and respect fairness and respect justice and respect, property ownership and things like that. We respect all of those things, and we hold them religiously, and we follow them not because of fear of punishment in this world as much as we do because of the fear of the punishment of the Lord. But as an aberration, every now and again, a law is legislated by people in wickedness, and it has no basis in morality. Laws like we had in this country that didn't allow, for example, people of a certain race to drink from a particular water fountain. By the way, Muslims are the ones who invented water fountains, and we never had water fountain segregation by race. Laws that wouldn't allow someone to eat at the same lunch counter as a person of another race. Those are unjust laws, and they deserve to be broken, and they deserve to be protested. And that's an exception. That's not the rule. The rule is that the law should be obeyed when it's reasonable. But every now and again, there's a law that's immoral. And so we see, mashallah, the teachings of Islam. Muhammad Ali, the boxer who passed away just not too long ago, not too many years ago, within our living memory. He was he had the heavyweight boxing championship. He had the title belt, and he was drafted, where he had to join the draft, and he refused to go and fight in Vietnam because he felt the war was unjust, as do many upright, ethical, and moral people in this country, of all different religions. And he made a very simple and powerful statement. It's a very simple and powerful statement. When he asked, "Why aren't you going to go and fight in Vietnam?" He said that no Viet Cong person ever called me the N-word. He said, "I have no enmity with those people. I'm not going to go there and kill them, go into their homeland and kill them and fight them and put them into harm's way." And they took his belt away from him, and they threw him in jail. And they took his belt away from him, and they took his title away from him, and they took all of these things away from him. And if he had gone and actually joined the army, do you think they're going to actually make him fight on the front lines? He would probably just be someone there that has like an easy duty in order to fulfill morale and whatnot. And even then, even if he did go and fight and whatnot, at least he would have kept his belt and kept his title. And he would have been treated like a hero by the mainstream society. But I have no doubt that it was a very unpopular decision at the time. But now, after time has passed, history has vindicated that stance of his. And the true vindication of his stance, inshallah, we pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show it to his creation on the Day of Judgment, that he actually did make the right decision. And there's great honor in it. And it is a prophetic act. And when one of us does it, the only reason we do it and the only way we could have done it is that Allah had given us an example in these upright and pious and righteous prophets of his that he sent to this world. Otherwise, how would we have known that this is also a way a person should conduct themselves? And so Sayyiduna Yusuf alayhissalam, he goes to jail. And jail is not fun nowadays. I'm sure everybody at some point or another has watched some sort of video or documentary or movie about life in jail. It's not fun times. So imagine how much harsher it was back then, when the concept of human rights was not really there like it is nowadays, and life was harsh enough for free people and normal people. And people in jail are the last priority. There's no, we're talking about sanitation issues and coronavirus and all this stuff. People would die of those things outside anyway. And when you're shackled to the wall, you don't have you're not going to really be rolling around with an N95 face mask, or, be talking about nutrition and getting vitamin D shortages for not seeing sunlight and whatever. And Egypt probably got really hot in the summers and things like that. But there he is. He's a Nabi of Allah Ta'ala, and he's this very beautiful person. And he's in jail. And he's in jail. Why? Because somebody else tried to do something wrong, and he didn't want to go with it. And that's it. That's the only reason he's in jail. He's innocent and he's in jail, but he's still making the best of it. And he's being a good cellie. He's being a good cellmate. He's being a good neighbor, which is also from the universal teachings of prophethood, that anyone who came with a message from Allah Ta'ala always endorsed this value of being a good neighbor. So his two cellmates, they both see dreams, and they say, "Hey, we saw these really interesting dreams," and they shared it with him. And he says, "I can interpret your dreams for you. I can tell you what do those dreams mean." And they say, "Okay." So they ask him what the interpretation is. So one of them, he says that I see myself. He says, "I used to be the cupbearer of the king, and I saw myself in a dream that I am pressing the juice and the wine out of grapes, and I'm filling the cup of the chalice of the king, and I prepare it for him to drink." And the second cellmate, he says that I saw in my dream that there is a loaf of bread on my head, and birds are coming down and eating from it. And so he's told both of these dreams, and then he says asked then, "Oh my prison mate, you tell me, interpret these dreams for me, tell us what they mean. And so he goes ahead and he answers their questions. But before he does so, he says what? He says, قال لا يأتيانكما طعام ترزقانه إلا نبأتكما بتأويله قبل أن يأتيكما ذلكما مما علمني ربي. He says that you won't be given your provision of food, except for after that by that time I will have informed you of the interpretation of these dreams. He says that this is from the gifts that my Lord has taught me. He says, إِنِّي تَرَكْتُ مِلَّةَ قَوْمٍ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَهُمْ بِالْآخِرَةِ هُمْ كَافِرُونَ. He says that indeed I have left behind a people, meaning the people that I lived with in Egypt, that a people and a civilization that don't believe in Allah, and they have disbelieved or turned their back on the belief in the hereafter. He says, alayhissalam, وَاتَّبَعْتُ مِلَّةَ آبَاءِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَإِسْحَاقَ وَيَعْقُوبَ مَا كَانَ لَنَا أَن نُشْرِكَ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. He says that but my civilization that I follow is the civilization of my forefathers, Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ishaq alayhi salam, Yaqub alayhi salam. He said that we never considered it cool or okay to worship anyone other than Allah. ذلك من فضل الله علينا وعلى الناس ولكن أكثر الناس لا يشكرون. I said, this is from the grace of the Lord upon us and upon all people. But most people are not thankful for God's grace. And so the point of mentioning this right now is what? Is that he had a skill set. He had something that other people needed, which is what? He could interpret the people's dreams in a way that made sense and that would actually help them to have a better future. And he was happy to help other people with that skill set. He doesn't ask for any money. He doesn't ask for any wealth. He doesn't ask them to call him sheikh. He doesn't ask for none of that stuff. He's happy to help them. However, he also, in the same spirit that he helps them with their dunya, he wants to help them with their deen. And the same spirit that he helps them with, their psychological condition and, knowing something about themselves and about their future through the dreams. He also wants to help them with their deen, meaning how to rectify their belief and their practice in this life, and more importantly, how to rectify their account for the day that they meet Allah Ta'ala. Because whatever happens, you could be beautiful, you could be smart, you could be funny, you could be charming, you could be graceful and elegant, you could be the president of the United States, you could be an NBA basketball player, you could be whatever you want. Okay, you can be the most wonderful of things in this world. At the end of the day, you're going to have to meet Allah Ta'ala on the day of judgment. And if you haven't straightened out your account that day, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, the street sweeper, the sewer cleaner, the person who died young, the person who lived in pain, all of those people who had their accounts with Allah straight, they're going to be happy forever. If you're like a wonderful person in this world, but your account isn't straightened out, then you're going to be, hurting for certain. For the same reason that he will go ahead and interpret their dreams, because he has love of what's good for them. For that same reason, he'll also tell them what they need to hear with regards to the message of faith in Allah Ta'ala, which is necessary for a person's salvation on the day of judgment, and for their eternal bliss, for their sa'ada abadiyah. And nowadays, people, they think like proselytization. People have no faith. They think proselytization is a burden. And they're like, oh, look, they're only giving out food because they want people to become their religion. And as far as I can tell, I've worked with a number of relief organizations. Alhamdulillah, none of the organizations we ever worked with ever said that if you don't pray, we're not going to help you, or if you don't attend a sermon, we're not going to help you, or if you don't dress a certain way, we're not going to help you. In fact, none of them even say if you're not a Muslim, we're not going to help you. They don't peg one to the other. However, as a human being, you can't claim to actually love a person by just giving them something to eat, but be like, the rest of it, the thing that's going to send you to the hellfire forever, and that's going to that's going to ruin your life in this world and your relations with your family and all of that. That we're never going to talk about anything like, to rectify any of that. If you love for your brother what you love for yourself, literally it's a hadith of the Prophet that none of you will perfect their faith until he loves for his brother the thing that he loves for himself. Now, if a person is going to, be punished in the hellfire forever for their kufr, for their disbelief, do you love that for yourself? No. The hadith of the Prophet is none of you will perfect your faith. He mentions or taste the sweetness of iman. And the third thing that he mentions in that list is what? Until you love for your, you hate to return to disbelief after having believed, just like a person would viscerally hate to be burned alive. And so this is also part of his giving nature and his love for his fellow man, and that we should also have that as well. We shouldn't feel like, oh, look, if we tell someone about Islam, somehow we're imposing on them. We're not imposing on them. You can tell them about it. If they don't want to hear, they can say, I don't want to hear about it. Okay, it's fine. We won't tell you about it. If you don't want to accept it, it's up to you. I cannot force you to accept it. La akraha fi din. Even if I took a gun to someone's head and said, become a Muslim or I'll shoot you, the Islam of that person is not going to be valid. Why? Because it has to happen from inside. It has to happen from their own volition. That's why it's literally a verse of the Quran, La akraha fi din. There's no need and there's no permission to force people with regards to religion. And despite occasional propaganda, serious historians will say that it's very rare in Islamic history, out of huge swaths of empires that stretch for centuries, very rarely was anyone ever forced to accept Islam. And even in the cases that they were, it was usually someone doing it for political reasons or for some other reasons that they did it. The theologians always said that such an Islam is neither valid nor useful, neither for the one converting the people, nor for the people who are being converted. And for that reason, Muslim countries traditionally always had huge non-Muslim populations, which was never the case, or rarely the case, in pre-modern history in Europe or in other places that were under the rule of Christianity or of other state religions. And so what ends up happening is that he calls them to the deen. And he's like, I'll interpret your dreams for you. I'll tell you about what your dreams are. But he calls them to iman. He calls them to faith, because whatever ends up happening, all of you are going to have to meet Allah Ta'ala one way or the other. Whatever ends up happening in the middle, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, and it's in your interest to straighten it out before then. And so what happens is he says to the one who sees himself pressing the wine into the chalice of the king to serve it to him, that you'll soon be freed. And he says to the one who sees the birds eating from the loaf of bread from his head, that you'll be crucified and your corpse will be left out on the cross, and the birds will literally pick your head apart. And this is the answer to the question that you were seeing. And this, brings up a long discussion about what dreams are. And it is an interesting and long discussion, and it is a discipline. Dream interpretation is a discipline of the deen, which intersects with psychology and intersects with a number of other sciences. And it's a long discussion. We probably don't have time for it right now. But the point is that the mind will see things in symbols, both with regards to itself, as well as experiences that the spirit has from the spiritual realm. So when a person goes to sleep, their spirit leaves their body. The body is still heart is beating, and the person's on life support. They're not dead by any stretch of the imagination in the biological sense. But the spirit leaves, like in death, the spirit leaves the body. Even though it has some sort of ethereal connection with the body, but it's not physically there. It's physically somewhere else. And so it'll see things in that different universe that it visits, where the spirits are, that are beyond time and space. And it sees things, and then when it comes back, it tells the mind about all the things that it saw. Now the mind is not able to understand what it saw, in that place. It's like, imagine a person travels back to the time that human beings lived in caves and tries to explain to them what are the different rides at Disneyland. The language is not there, the concepts are not there, there's just like a whole lot that you'd have to like really simplify things to a very strange degree. And tell somebody like, oh, there's a choo-choo train, what is that? It's like a metal donkey that like goes around a track, and they're like, oh, metal donkey, what is that? So these are all symbols that basically the spirit tells the mind. And so a person who's versed in that can then decipher what do those symbols mean, and how is that information useful for a person. And there are different sources for the dreams. Some come from the spirit realm, some come internally from the mind, some are the insinuations of shaitan, some are the effect of righteous people or of angelic presences on a person. That's a whole separate discipline of study that should be studied, inshallah. And should sign up for Dar al-Qasim classes. Sheikh Musa will teach you Alif Ba Ta Tha, teach you basic Arabic, inshallah, and we'll get you on your way to learning this and so many other things. So one of the things that he says is to the cellmate that is is about to be freed. He says, look, when you get back to the king and you get your old job back, mention me to him, that there's this dude in jail and he's innocent. He's, like, this is what happened to him. This is his story, and he's a nice guy. And like, see what you can do, get some strings pulled and get me released. Why? Because he was only in jail to, basically hide and protect himself from the women. And, he's trying to now find a way to get out. And so what happens is the gets out, and in the exuberance of his release, for several years he forgets to mention Sayyiduna Yusuf alayhissalam to the king. And shaitan is the one who basically obstructs this from happening in this person. Until one day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes something happen, which is that the king himself, he sees a dream. And it's very disturbing. It's very vivid to him, and it's very disturbing to him. And he knows it means something. It's a message that's trying to get to him, but he has no idea what that message is. No way how to interpret it. And so what does he say? He says, I see 7 cattle. And it's really cool because this is, I'm just kind of like a linguistical nerd, so maybe some of you guys won't think this is cool, but like many of the translations of the Quran and the translations of the Bible will translate this word cattle as kine. And kine is the old plural for the word cow. And it is from the Germanic plural. We have the S plural in English, like book, books, chair, chairs, hat, hats. Whereas most of the Germanic languages, continental Germanic languages, don't have the S plural, they have the N plural, right? So, brother, brethren, but you don't say house, housen. Well, you probably did at some point in the past. That's a gross oversimplification, but anyway. So he says, I see 7 kine, meaning what? I see 7 cows that are fat, and then 7 emaciated, like really sickly thin cows come and eat them, which is like disturbing, right? Because A, cows don't even eat each other, and B, one would think that it's the fat cows that eat the weak and the sick ones. Rather, the sick ones are the ones that are devouring the fat ones, the healthy ones, and they still stay sick. The sickness is still there, and it's like really disturbing to him. And then he says, then I'm shown 7 healthy ears of corn, and 7 other ones that are withered and dry and dead. And so he says to all of his, like every king, a king cannot just be like, hey, I'm king, all of you pay taxes, you stop opposing me, you go to jail because I don't like you. No, he has to have people who work for him, right? So his inner privy council of advisors are like, they're pretty smart people. He surrounds himself with pretty smart people. A dumb king who surrounds himself successfully with smart people can still rule relatively well. And this king is obviously he's not a slouch. He's relatively apt and talented, and he sees this vision with great vividness. And so he asks his like smart courtiers and his privy council. He's like, I see this dream, and it's so clear, and it's telling me something. I know it's telling me something. What does it mean? And he says, Aftuni fi ru'yaya in kuntum lirru'a ta'burun. He says, literally, give me fatwa, meaning answer my question. Fatwa literally just means answering a question, and then later on it becomes like an expert legal opinion with regards to the law of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the sacred Sharia. But he says to him, he says, answer this question, give me the fatwa. What is the meaning of this dream? And they all dismissed it. They said, Abghathu ahlam. He says that this is all just, maybe you had indigestion. Maybe it's just static in your head. And at any rate, وَمَا نَحْنُ بِتَأْوِيلِ الْأَحْلَامِ بِعَالِمِينَ. He said, and we don't know how to do dream interpretation, psychoanalysis. We don't know how to do those things anyway. And so they dismissed it, and he wasn't content with that. He says, no, there's more to it than that. And so finally, it's time for this cellmate to remember his old cellmate that he left behind. He said, there was a man who I left behind in jail, who knows how to interpret dreams. He says, so send me to go and ask him what's going on. And so he goes back to his old cellmate after so many years. He says, Yusuf, ayyuha siddiq, O Yusuf, ayyuha siddiq, O you person of saintly veracity. You are a person, everything you ever said to us was true. Everything you ever said to us came true. Everything you ever spoke was true. You're just a real person. You're a very real person. Yusuf, a person whose truth and whose realness is saintly. Tell us, you give us the fatwa, you give us the answer. That what does it mean when someone sees 7 fat kine being eaten by 7 emaciated kine, and 7 ears of corn that are green, and 7 other ones that are withering, dead, so that I can return to the people who sent me, and they can be informed. He says, alayhissalam, he interprets the dream. He's not stingy. He's not, contract negotiation for NBA or whatever. He doesn't call his agent. What does he say? He says that you will harvest for 7 years a great harvest, and whatever you harvest, whatever you cut down from your crop, leave the corn in its ears, leave it in its unopened form, and store it. He says, فَذَرُوهُ فِي سُنبُلِهِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِمَّا تَأْكُلُونَ. And just take from that crop, that harvest, the few parts that you wish to eat. The rest of it, it's going to be a bumper crop. Just put it straight into storage. Store it straight away. He says, then after that, 7 years will come, and they will be shidad. They will be very severe in their drought and in their qaht, in the starvation that will happen in them. And those 7 years will eat, meaning you will eat in those 7 years all of that crop that you stored in the 7 previous years, except for very little that will be left over afterward. And then after that, you will have a year in which the people will receive aid, meaning the rains will come down, and the things will come back to normal, and people will again harvest a bumper crop, and they will again be able to eat it and drink again like they did from before. And so he gives this interpretation, and the king he says that's what it is. That's exactly what it is. He says that's exactly what it is. And he says, bring this person to me. This person, he saw the money, he hit the target on the head. That's exactly what it means. He says, bring this person to me. And when the messenger on behalf of the king came to Sayyiduna Yusuf alayhissalam, he says, before I go to him, let him himself investigate the issue with regards to these women that because of whom I'm in jail. Let them investigate, which means what? It was something we mentioned from before, that the prophets alayhissalam, their vindication is very important. Their vindication itself is part of the deen, and they're very concerned that people should know publicly and decisively that they were not evildoers and they're not bad people. And so he says that go and find out what was the deal with those women that cut their hands. My Lord, meaning Allah, has full knowledge of their plotting and their scheming. And so the king inquired. He asked the ladies, what was the deal when you tried to seduce Yusuf alayhi salam against his own will? They said that exalted Allah Ta'ala above such a possibility that he did something wrong. We never knew him to do anything evil. And even the wife of the Aziz, she says, like after all these years, the truth comes out. And I'm the one who seduced him against his own wishes. And he's telling nothing but the truth. And Sayyiduna Yusuf, he said, the only reason that I made you investigate all this is so that you can believe what I'm saying in the future, so that this isn't a lingering doubt of yours, so that you can know that I wasn't and commit treachery when in a moment that the king didn't know what was going on. And that in the moment that the Aziz didn't know what was going on. Why? Because Allah Ta'ala never guides and never brings to a good end the plotting of traitors, of treacherous people. And this is a very moving part of the story as well, that's mentioned by the ulama with regards to the story of Zulaykha, the wife of the Aziz, that after Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam goes to jail, the barakah of the house leaves with him. And after some time, the Aziz himself dies. And she loses her patron, and she becomes poor, and her life becomes much more difficult. And the years pass by, and she loses her youth, and she loses her beauty, and she loses her wealth. And she, her life really takes a nosedive after that. And it's mentioned that she had an idol that she used to worship, and her life gets to such a bad point where she just looks at the idol and says, like, you've done nothing for me, and you've neither given me good advice or guided me how to behave well, nor did you protect me from any difficulty or any hardship, and nor were you able to give me anything I wanted in my life or protect me from anything I ever feared. And so she throws it and breaks it. And then thereafter, she goes to Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam. After all of this happens, and he is given a position which we'll mention in the story inshallah tomorrow, that he's given a position of power and prominence. And she says to him, I'm sorry, I did all that stuff to you, I'm sorry. And Allah Ta'ala put her through fitna as well, because Allah Ta'ala tested her and put her through tribulation as well. And the test wasn't what was before. She herself was not able to hold herself back. But the test was for that moment that she realizes that the idol cannot do anything for her. And she returns to the worship of Allah Ta'ala. And she, poor thing, she thought she was going to marry him. She saw him in her dreams from before they even met, like we mentioned yesterday. And when she saw him and she knew that this was the man that I was in love with before I even met him, she couldn't control herself. And so she went through all of this difficulty, and finally will, Allah Ta'ala will guide her to the truth, to the haqq. And then she goes to make amends with Yusuf alayhi salam, and she says to him that I have 3 requests for you if you can fulfill them. And he says, of course. She says, 1, that you forgive me. And he forgives her alayhi salam, which is from the beautiful akhlaq of nubuwah. Nobody from this world would ever be able to forgive something like that. And the second request was what? That you pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala return my beauty to me. because I've become a withered old lady, and life has basically left me. So that Allah Ta'ala, my life has left me, and I have nothing left to look forward from it. So he makes dua, he indulges her request, he makes dua, and Allah Ta'ala returns her beauty to her. And then she asks one more thing, which is that now my request is that you marry me, and that he marries her, which is that things, there's a right way of doing them and there's a wrong way of doing them. When they're done in the right way, how wonderful and beautiful they are, and when they're done in the wrong way, how ugly and horrible are they. So that was that loose end which gets tied up. Inshallah, we will continue and hopefully finish the rest of the story tomorrow. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his fadl and his mercy. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barak ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma rabbi ighfir warham wa anta khairur rahimin. Ya Allah, have mercy on us. Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyumu bi rahmatika nastaghithu. O living and O the one through whom everything in this universe subsists, we cry out for your mercy, a desperate cry. Aslih lana sha'nana kullahu wa la takilna ila anfusina tarfata 'ain. Rectify for us our affairs and complete and in total, and do not leave us to our own devices even for the blinking of an eye. Allahumma la ilaha illa anta subhanaka inna kunna min al-zalimin wa in lam taghfir lana wa tarhamna lanakunanna min al-khasirin. Allahumma rabbi ighfir warham wa anta khairur rahimin. Allahumma taqabbal minna siyamana wa qiyamana fi shahri Ramadan. Ya Allah, accept our fasting from us and our prayers from us and our sadaqat and our zakat and our sadaqah from us in this Mubarak month of Ramadan, and give us barakah in our iftar and give us barakah in our suhoor, and make it a means for our rectification and make us better people than we came into it through it, Ya Allah, and use it as a means to protect us and protect the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, and protect our lands and our neighbors and those who have done good by us from the disease and epidemic that is sweeping the land as we speak, and from all other diseases and all other epidemics. And the worst disease is the one of ignorance and misguidance. Ya Allah, protect us by the barakah of this fast and this Mubarak prayer, and by your sacred name Allah, and by La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that shahada and testimony that there's no God except for Allah, and that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is his messenger. Wa sallallahu tabarak wa ta'ala wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifuna. وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.